And there's more Stewards at home. And then the Hyde Park Nature Center has it. Everyone seems to be doing online stuff now, which is really wonderful because in fact, you can do a whole lot more than when you had to be in person for all of this stuff. And anyway, so you can just click on these links to see all these various online things to do. And I've also included edible gardens, and Jane Hayes has some really interesting stuff on permaculture, and I will keep adding to this with more interesting things to do. And we also have other sections on native plant gardening, research, plants, endless stuff. You could spend hours on our site if you wanted to do that. Now, I just wanted to mention that Jacqueline has created a number of these activities, and the newest one is really cool. It's a bird survey, and if you click on the link, you'll go to a folder, and in the folder there are different documents. So this is just one document, and she's got a compilation, beautiful bird pictures, and that's what that looks like. So so there's a checklist, and here's a really cool one: mnemonics for birds. If you ever wanted to know what the sounds are like, so you can just see like cheep cheeps of cheep, or sweet sweets of sweet, whatever they are. Anyway, so she's got all that really neat stuff, and then there's 3 weeks of this so far. And from our March presentation, which was about Project Swallowtail, which is this one here, which is a local effort to create pollinator garden corridors. I am a block ambassador. I think we have 45 block ambassadors in the western part of the city, near around Hyde Park up to, I think it's Ossington or Bloor Court. Anyway, so this is a project where people can get together virtually, and we have just had the first order of plants. So Project Swallowtail gets plants and then is distributing them next week, and then we're going to be talking about all the plants. Now, there is a Facebook group for Project Swallowtail. Everyone is welcome, because there will be tons of information and discussion about growing native plants for pollinators. And it's connected to In the Zone Gardens, which is World Wildlife Fund in Carolina in Canada. And if people register their gardens, what that will do is it will plot everybody on a map, and there will be other activities, getting people together, maybe in person, maybe not. But it also is a way for everyone to track native plants and discover, are there areas where we need more connectors to focus on certain areas, so people can go out and try to get more people in different areas so that there's a continuous pollinator corridor everywhere. Okay, and so with Project Swallowtail and their Facebook group, everyone can join that. And the last thing is citizen science under iNaturalist. And I don't know if you're familiar with that or not, but you can take all of your sightings of everything and just upload it. It's great on your phone. You can just take a picture of something, upload it. It will make suggestions about what it might be. And then it's got your location. And then what's really nice is that after you do that, someone goes and verifies it, and you'll get an email that, yes, it is what you thought it was. Or if you don't know what it is, they can identify it. So I've been using it to identify invasive species. My neighbor had this plant that he didn't know what it was, and I thought I knew that it wasn't a good one, but I took a picture, uploaded it, Japanese knotweed. I said, okay, get rid of it. So it's so nice because it's not just when things are in bloom, and it's for insects, butterflies, birds, mammals, plants, everything. And it's just totally international. It will go to eBird for your bird sightings, and it's just a way for everyone to participate in citizen science. Okay, Heather, I know I've taken up a lot of your time.
Oh, no worries. It's a very interesting project.
And we still don't know if we're going to have our plant sale or not in August. So everything is up in the air, but there's so much to do remotely. So I just encourage everybody to do that when you're not out in your own garden. So I am going to, let's see, landscape. There we go. I'm going to stop sharing now, and I'm going to let Heather take it away.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm just going to share my screen now, and we're just going to hop in here and have some fun. Perfect. I know, I heard that. Is that because of the chameleon plant? Is that because of the chameleon plant? All my plants come with a disclaimer. So I'm just going to hop it right in. But yes, as you can see, the very first slide is showing a chameleon plant. So that's this pink one here. It is highly invasive. But I'm going to talk about a little bit more about that in a little bit. So I'm just going to hop right in here. Kind of the plan for the talk and how I've laid it out is I do want to kind of give everyone a little bit more information about my own background. I think it's important that as I introduce these little weirdos, as I call them, it's kind of good for you all to have a sense of how weird and wonderful I am. There's a reason why I like weird and strange plants, and I think I'm also a little weird and strange myself. So I kind of want to give everyone a little bit of that information. Then I'm going to go to actually right into the little weirdos. So the unique, strange, awesome, edibles, beneficial plants. It's kind of a mix of a whole bunch of stuff that all have their unique characteristics, and that's why they're my weird and wonderful favorites. There will be an opportunity throughout the presentation for questions. So do please use the chat that is on the Zoom, and Sharon is actually going to be taking notes and stuff, and as we go through, there will be some opportunities for some questions. After that, going to get into some interesting plant combinations. So these are just things that I've seen in other designs or things that I have designed and implemented in some gardens. Also going to talk about some conversation starters in aspects of plants as well as designs. There's some really interesting things that I wanted to share with everyone. A couple low maintenance tips and tricks. It's probably important that everyone knows that because I'm in London, I am used to having larger spaces. So even though some of these plants I recommend for pots and plants, I do talk about landscape or backyards. And I do understand that there's probably a lot of people watching today who maybe don't necessarily have room for some of the plants I'm going to talk about. Towards the end, some personal recommendations. So these are things that have inspired me along the way, things that I do think everyone should look up and check out to see if it's something that excites you as well. Thanks and inspiration, as well as some sources. So right off the hop, in 2013, I decided to study landscape design at Fanshawe College. I live relatively close to Fanshawe, so it was an easy choice for me that I could walk there. It's a 3-year advanced degree program, and all the professors there really inspired me, but they are so plugged in and involved with the industry and profession of plants, landscape design, horticulture. A lot of them own their own business. While I was there, I actually ran for Fanshawe Student Union president, and I came in second. I didn't win, but that's okay. It was a good journey. My very first co-op, I was talking earlier before the talk started about whistling gardens. And this is a botanical garden. I wrote this down that it started 2012. So May 2012, it opened its doors. It is 14 acres and it was all cornfield. So when Darren and Wanda purchased the property, they designed and just everything. Incredible, magical place. It was my first co-op, and I lived on site in a trailer. So that picture there, that's me and Genaro. That's my friend there from Mexico. He taught me Spanish. I've forgotten most of it. But we had a lot of fun. So living there, working there, I had free access, free range to the garden 24/7, 7 days a week. So incredible place. Highly recommend everyone checks that out if you haven't been. My second co-op through Fanshawe was at the Royal Botanical Gardens in Burlington. They've been around for over 80 years. They're a huge steward of land, of pollinators, of plants, plant collections. Really cool place. While I was there, I actually had the opportunity to create some sculptures. So those red sculptures there, that's actually my work. And I wanted to create something that would capture the snow in the winter. So the red really, I think, vibrates and complements the white snow really well. Something else that was really exciting at RBG, so that's me on the lawnmower having a lot of fun, is that little spot behind me on the mower there. I recommended to the head of horticulture at the time that there should be something there. You know, it's a big spot in the parking lot and we should put something there. So the head of horticulture actually took me to a nursery and I got to pick the tree that would go there. So I picked a umbrella pine and it is still there. So this picture was sent to me 2 or 3 days ago, actually, by the new head of horticulture there. And it was just really exciting to see that the plant that I picked out that was probably 1 foot wide by 1 foot tall at the time is still there, still thriving, and it's about 4 feet now. So it's getting pretty big. Again, through Fanshawe, I went to a 6-week study abroad trip to Italy and Spain. This was a life changer for me. To see perennials that's root systems could easily be over 100 years old. Just fantastic. You can't even fathom until you're there in the space. Talk about material and history, the plants, the composition, the scale, the sheer scale of some of the plants. It was fantastic. And yeah, that's me with the silly glasses making a funny face, because that's me. And I also got engaged in Italy. So my husband came with us for a week and proposed in Florence. So I had to say yes. He was, you know, perfect. While I was there, we had to, as students, we had to do a final project on anything we wanted that had to do with our experience. So a lot of people did projects on the food or perennials or the materials that they saw. Somebody did a project on accessibility because they were wheelchair bound during this 6-week stint in Italy and Spain. And I became really fascinated with how my fellow classmates interacted with the space. So while everyone was taking pictures of the plants and the materials and drawing and sketching, I was taking pictures of them. And that was my final project. And I think to this day, I'm still fascinated by how places can affect us and how we have an impact on the spaces that are surrounding us as well. When I graduated from Fanshawe College in 2016, I was hired by Rural Roots Landscaping, where I did project management, designing, estimating. Some of the highlights of my 2 years there was 2 design projects at a cemetery in Ridgetown. So this is one of the designs here. This is a 3D model using Google SketchUp. And this is the future plan for a crematorium. So these kind of cubes here will be installed at a later date. And this is the final project. So that is currently installed and still there. And then at the back of the cemetery is a scattering garden, which I haven't done a site visit yet. I'm excited to see it, but my design did get installed. Over here, this is the Green Street Challenge. I'm not sure if anyone is familiar with that or if there was a Green Street Challenge in Toronto. I'm not sure. But it's an initiative to try and get people outside and, you know, being on the green. So we had, I think, 700 rolls of sod donated from a local sod company, and we sodded downtown London between Wellington and Richmond. We just covered it in sod and created an outdoor park, which I thought was really, really cool. After Rural Roots Landscaping, I went on to be the assistant production manager for enhancements with TLC Landscaping here in London. And while I was there, I had the opportunity to do a design internship in Cairo in Egypt for a whole month. So November 2018, I lived in Cairo and worked at a design studio, a design firm. And something that was fascinating to me in Egypt was the street trees. So these trees, this type of pruning was everywhere. As common as you would see a street tree, maple here, for example. This is what all the trees looked like. And the amount of work, you always see people out there pruning them and shearing them, and I found it fascinating. So I wanted to share that with everyone. Because of COVID, I'm no longer employed with TLC. My position was just no longer required, but I am doing a lot of freelance work. So now this is kind of a snapshot of what I've been doing. Lots of public speaking. This is my first Zoom presentation. I do find it a bit of a challenge speaking to my computer and not seeing anyone, because I'm just looking at my presentation, where I'm used to being on stage and interacting and taking questions and trying to make people laugh. So apologies if I stutter or stammer or speak too fast. I hope that Sharon will, chime in and tell me to slow down or repeat something if needed. Yeah, so that's a little bit about this. I'm actually working at Indiva right now, which is located here in London. It's a Canadian licensed producer of cannabis and cannabis products, which is definitely very interesting and very different from what I was doing before. So, hopping into the little weirdos. This is where I wanted to give everyone the disclaimer that not all of the plants I'm going to introduce are native, necessarily pollinator attractors or edible. This presentation, it's about interest. It's about visual interest, as well as I do try to share some of the benefits of some of those plants. Okay. So the first one, right off the hop, and I know this is the one that Sharon was like, oh no. So Chameleon Plant, it is one of my favorites. However, it is highly, highly invasive. If you plant this in a garden, its root system will get into your foundation, it will spread, it will suffocate out other plants, it will grow up and over other plants, it will go under walkways and come up in your lawn. So why I say I still like this plant is I like it for pots, and pots only. The smell is almost citrusy. It's a very clean smell. So I actually have some near our front door. And I love that when I'm coming home or leaving the house, this is the smell that I get. So it is one of my favorites, but consider yourself warned. Do not plant that, especially near any kind of native or naturalized protected areas, because that will cause some serious damage. It's edible, which is kind of interesting. I wanted to put that in there. This perennial here, so Euphorbia Scot Rainbow, it's great for small spaces. So if you've got a small landscape or a really small front or backyard, Scot Rainbow only gets to about 20 inches width and height, and it's a clumper, not a spreader, which means you plant one, you will always have one. It won't go to seed, it won't spread, it will just get bigger and bigger and bigger. Beautiful fall interest, great little flowers. I love the color and the visual, the fine texture of this plant. Spiral begonia, so this one is an annual. I believe you can keep it indoors as a tropical. I've never tried because I don't have a lot of success with indoor plants. Also known as escargot begonia because of the spiral, kind of looks like a snail shell. Winter aconite. This one is not native, very, very small bulbs, and it comes up so early that sometimes there's still snow on the ground. And I love seeing those pops of yellow with the snow. And I do see bees visiting these quite a bit. It's very, very early in the spring. I actually have this planted in my lawn. Because it's such an early bloom, by the time the blooms are finished, it's ready to cut. It's the time to cut your grass for the first time. So I like to put these all throughout my lawns or lawn areas. The next one, this one, Catherine Hodgkin iris, is so small. It kind of makes me think of an exotic bird, feathers of some kind. It's only about 4 to 6 inches tall. And in this picture, it's actually shown with the winter aconite. So again, this is something you could put in lawn areas. And it could spread, and then when the bloom's finished, it's time to cut the grass. Bloodroot. This one can spread quite vigorously if it's really, really happy. If it has the perfect conditions, it can get out of hand. Later in the presentation, I have some tips and tricks of how to contain some of these spreaders. But with Bloodroot, I just love the white, bright white flower that it gets. And the leaves to me are so interesting and fascinating. So even though when the flowers finish, the leaves stay on and they will stay for the rest of the season. So you still have this interesting foliage in the garden. Buttonbush. Great for naturalized areas because it's definitely a shrubby type shrub. It doesn't grow in a perfect ball or anything like that. But when I see this, it just, now that I'm looking at it, actually it kind of looks like coronavirus. I didn't mean to do that. But it's great for attracting songbirds, butterflies as well. Very, very fragrant. And it does have a long bloom time. Really, really interesting in the garden. Popcorn plant. Usually when I present this talk live, I'm very interested to see how many people have seen, heard of, or experienced this plant in person before. I can't see the chat right now, but if people want to kind of put that in, I'd love to know if this is something everyone is familiar with. When I discovered it, I thought it was the weirdest, coolest thing ever. So in South Africa, it grows as a tree. It's a massive, massive tree, similar to a horse chestnut, like it's that kind of scale or look. This one, it's actually a member of the legume family. So when it's hot enough, it can grow into a small, like a tree. But the flowers actually smell like buttered popcorn. And I didn't believe it until I smelled it, but it really does. And they have one, or they usually have them at Whistling Gardens. So if you'd like to check it out and see it, that's the place to go. Eastern prickly pear cactus. During my co-op at Whistling Gardens, this was in their rock garden. And I was shocked to learn that this is native to Ontario. It's actually considered an endangered species. It's very rare now to find in nature. That's due to erosion that's happening. The loss of habitat has been pretty severe for this plant. And the little fruits. So after the flower finishes, you get the fruit, which is the little red knobs on it. Those are edible. I've never tried it. I'm a little scared to. Would also be interested to know if any of you guys have tried to eat prickly pear cactus and what your experience was like. Microbiota Deku Sada. This plant looks very similar to a creeping juniper. Foundation plant, grows very low to the ground. It is a slow grower, so it's not going to grow and take over too quickly. So in that aspect, it's easier to maintain. But what I like about this guy is the fall interest. So where a juniper or many evergreens that are out there kind of stay that green throughout fall and winter, this one turns this glorious purple color, which is just beautiful, especially in a sculptural garden when there's snow. So that's one of my favorites. Blackberry Lily. This guy is a clumper, low maintenance. The flowers are so small, so delicate, and the foliage looks very much like an iris. So it has the tall spikes, kind of like a grass. And then when the flowers finish, the little green seed heads almost look like insects in the garden because they're on these delicate stems. So they kind of blow and move in the wind, and they're very, very charming in the garden. But the real showstopper for me are the seed heads. So in fall, and they do perpetuate into winter, the black seeds are so hard. They're great for flower bouquets or cut flower arrangements or winter wreaths. I'll often go and collect these and incorporate them into winter or Christmas planters because it's something you don't normally see in a Christmas planter, but I like to add some other Christmas red berries and stuff, and then these really make those pop. Hydrangeas. Who has never heard of a hydrangea? Come on, Heather, this is supposed to be weird and wonderful plants, and you're showing us a hydrangea. So what I wanted to do is just kind of take you on a hydrangea journey for a second. So the picture here, this is probably the most common hydrangea, Hydrangea macrophylla. And this one, it's got the straight green foliage, it's got round spherical blooms. white, purple, pinks, lime greens, has a whole range of colors. Then you also have the Paniculata hydrangea. So this one, the flower blooms themselves are cone shape. So that's a little bit more, I would say, interesting, but still pretty common. This one, Hydrangea quercifolia. This is oak leaf hydrangea. So it's a low grow shrub. Some of them can get quite large, but they're very easy to maintain, and the leaves can get as big or bigger than your hand. Just beautiful, beautiful foliage. This one, Hydrangea petiolaris. So this is the climbing hydrangea. It's a vine, but the flowers are lace-like and very similar to kind of a combination of hydrangea and Queen Anne's lace or wild carrot, which leads me to my favorite, which is Hydrangea schizophrenia. So you can imagine what that is. Schizophrenia, like schizophrenia. It's not sure what flower it wants to be. So for schizophrenia, around the outside margin of the flower, of the lace-like main center flower of the hydrangea, instead of having the 4 petal flowerets that you see on hydrangea, this one, they're single petals. And to me, it's interesting. It's fascinating to see. I know it comes from Asia, but I'm not sure where exactly it's from. But this one, it's a great conversation piece, I think, in a garden or in a landscape, because anyone who does know plants and they're looking at it, they're like, what is that? That's not a hydrangea, is it? And the conversation goes from there. Foxtail lily. I first saw this at Whistling Gardens, and it's a bulb, just like a tulip bulb. I have only seen about a 50% success rate with planting these. They are very fussy. So when you plant it, it looks like a tulip bulb, but then the roots, when they shoot out, they get very long and very strangly, and they look like a giant spider. I'm sure that gave somebody a heart attack at one point, because the root system on these it's horrifying to look at. But these can get like 6-8 feet tall, real showstopper in the garden. If anyone has ever planted these and had a really good success rate with planting them, I'd love to know what your secret is. So please let me know in a little bit. And Sonia Bluestar. So this is a perennial that dies right back to the soil line, but it looks like and is shaped like a small shrub. So it's fern-like foliage, very, very fine texture in the garden. In spring, it's got that almost silvery green foliage. And then in the summer, the foliage actually turns a darker green, and you get these blue, almost true blue flowers, which is fairly rare in the garden. Normally, blue is more of a darker purple or a really, really light blue. So this picture doesn't really give it justice up close, but this has a very true, almost a dark blue color, and then it fades to a powder blue. But then in fall, the whole shrub, the entire plant, turns various colors of reds, oranges, lime green, yellow. And then easy maintenance. You just cut it right at the soil line, and it goes through the entire growth system again the following season. Just a really cool, you get 3 different looks all in one plant throughout the seasons. Another really cool one for seasonal interest is Fothergilla. Great foundation planting. You put this up against a fence or somewhere behind a garden. You can put your smaller, shorter plants in front of it. But it gets this bottle brush flower in the spring. So before the leaves even pop out, you get these bottle brush flowers, and then the leaves come out. And the leaves are the silvery green foliage, which actually, again, give you that fall interest later on in the autumn. Seven Suns. This tree I saw at Fanshawe College on the grounds, and I could not believe the amount of pollinators on this thing. It is not native. It's another one from, I do want to say Asia, but I don't remember where. But it was actually humming. The tree was humming with pollinators. I saw dragonflies on it, I saw butterflies, we saw bees, flies, we saw beetles. Just incredible that one tree could attract and feed so many different, varieties of pollinators. Very, very interesting, very fragrant. And you get two different looks of the flower. So the early flower is white, and then as it goes into autumn, the flowers remain on the tree and actually turn a pinkish, almost a burgundy red type color. Pawpaw. I'm sure many people here are familiar with the pawpaw. However, if you're not, it is fantastic tree. You do need to plant more than one of them. They do need to generally get pollen from another tree that's different from them genetically. So a clone won't pollinate a clone. Do correct me if that's incorrect, but I'm pretty sure that's right. So it needs another pawpaw tree for pollination, but then it also can get pollen or pollinated from other types of trees, but it does need some pollen from another pawpaw tree. Okay. Also a very interesting story too, how the seeds spread all the way from Texas, Florida, up to Ontario. So that's a whole talk for a whole other day. Nodding onion. So this one is native here in Ontario. Very graceful flower. Looks like the allium, but it's kind of had a really long week, right? Or it's having a really sad time, kind of facing downwards, but so delicate. I think these would, there's something fairy-like about them. Great pollinator attractor and deer resistant. I'm not sure how much deer problems you have in Toronto, but in London, deers will eat everything. Chequered Lily. This one, spring bloom. It does naturalize, it'll spread by seed. I've seen them in purple and white. Really interesting. It almost looks painted. It looks like someone or a man-made plant, but it does not. Spotted bee balm. So this one looks very different from the Monarda that we commonly see in the greenhouse. This one, the spotted bee balm, is the native. Great pollinator attractor. Really interesting vertical interest, because you've got these panicles, or these spikes almost of the plant, but then the actual flower petals and the leaflets are holding downwards. So you're both looking up and down at the same time. I just think it's a fascinating plant in the garden. Wintergreen. So this is native here in Ontario. Excellent ground cover. Much better than using like a euonymus or a periwinkle, which is invasive. English ivy. Cattani Aster, not one of my favorites. I apologize if I offend anyone, but Cattani Aster, I think, is just a garbage collector. It's great for the wind blows and catches garbage. So it is not in my plant talk today. Great fall interest. The tiny fruit are edible, but generally not for people. You can, but they're so small that it's better to leave them for the animals. Canadian hemlock, Suga canadensis. This one, I am lucky enough to have one in my backyard. I have a neighbor that doesn't like it because the needles fall and clog their eaves troughs. But to me, it's worth it. You get the chartreuse lime green color in the spring, and then in fall you get this bright, but almost a banana yellow over the whole tree. So it looks like an evergreen, but it's not. It does drop its needles, similar to the metasequoia, where it looks like it would be green all year, but it drops its needles for winter. Nasturtiums. I wonder if anyone on this presentation today, if anyone has any experience cooking with nasturtiums. I would love your recipes. Contact me later and let's swap. This flower, it's an annual, and it's a great spiller in a pot. I've seen it grown as a vine, but for me, if you just plant it and let it do its own thing in a pot, it will kind of curl over the side of the pot, and you get these almost lily pad flowers that kind of float in the air or in the wind. And they taste very similar to black pepper. It's a very peppery flavor. I love putting them in salads, or if I'm doing a dinner party and I'm entertaining guests, I like to put the flowers on the dinner plates as decoration, but also to eat because you can. Gray dogwood. So this one, unlike the red osier dogwood, so the red osier, that's the one that has red stems from the base all the way to the tip. This one, in the winter and in the fall, the only thing that remains red on the plant are actually these little pieces here. So the newest growth that are part of the flower base with all the flower heads on the end, once it turns to or goes to seed, it's only that part that stays red. So you get these fan-like or crescents of red in the garden. So instead of having a whole red bush, you get these lines of red, almost like waves. Just beautiful. Great pollinator attractor. Really interesting in the landscape year-round. And I'm sure lots of you guys know this, but in case you didn't, there's a fun fact about dogwoods. So if you're out in the woods and you see something and you think it's a dogwood, but you're not sure if it's a dogwood, if you split apart the leaf really slowly, it actually has almost like a spider's silk in the veins. So as you pull the leaf apart, you get these string-like spider webs that will actually web through the leaf. And to my knowledge, dogwood is the only leaf that will do that. Do correct me if I'm wrong. I learn something new every day. Bunchberry, Cornus canadensis. This is one I would love to hear your stories. If anyone has had any success in buying and planting this, it does really well naturally in woods, in the forest, in bogs, kind of moist areas, dappled sun or dappled shade, I guess. Every time I plant this, it dies. So I know that I'm doing something wrong. It is so beautiful in nature. And I've not been able to recreate that for residential clients who really want to do kind of a naturalized garden. I have not been able to get these guys to grow. So I would love to know your stories because I would love to use it more and figure out what I'm doing wrong. Here's something interesting. So talk about little weirdos. Dandelions to begin with. Lots of people hate them. I happen to love them. My lawn is a sea of yellow in early spring and I keep them. I don't pick them. They're great early food for pollinators. And I'm a big dandelion lover. And then I discovered that pink and white dandelions are a real thing. And I feel like my mind was blown a little bit. I don't have these in my garden. However, I would really like to. So I'm in the process of getting some seeds from this from a trusted source. But great little strange weird plant for the garden and great conversation starter where people come over. It's like, is that a dandelion? Yes, it is. Perfect. And so I'm just going to stop sharing my screen for a second here. And that is an opportunity that we have for a question. Yes, Hemlock larch. Thank you. That is right. I was mixing up my Taxus and my Thuga canadensis. Perfect. Is Sharon here with us? I don't see her video on. Oh, there we go.
I wouldn't leave you alone.
Perfect. Just taking a little break if there was any questions. I see that we're at 42 participants. I haven't looked at the chat yet to see if I made anyone too mad and if anyone left or not. With my plant selections.
So afterwards, you may want to look at the comments about the pawpaws.
Yes.
Comments on pawpaws. And while people are thinking about the questions, I just wanted to mention that with Project Pollinator, one of the things we're trying to do is to find out from people their success stories, specifically with plants, say from High Park. So we've had plant sales for 20 years, I guess. So if anyone has planted stuff from High Park and it's growing in your garden, or if you had even bad stories like total failures might be useful if you have any idea why. But I'd like to collect information from people on that. And I'm going to create a Google Sheet so people can make their comments. And there will be a link on the online resources page to the Google Sheet. So I should have done this before, but so people can put in where their garden is and the specific plants that you might have planted, because we just want to see how the plants that we've had have sort of spread through the neighborhood. And the other part of Project Pollinator is a plant swap. So we're also trying to find out who's got different kinds of plants that they may want to swap. And of course, how we do that now is a little bit more complicated, but they are doing that. So it would be really nice to have the stories from people on their native plant growing successes in particular. If there's anything that you know why it was successful, or again, if you said, or if you're like me and really, really, really wanted cardinal flowers, but they never grow because I've got clay and they just don't like it, and shade. So if you try to grow things in the conditions they don't like, they're not going to do well. But other than that, if you can give us some ideas, and I know Jillian, who's here, has kept native plants on her balcony for years and years and years, and she's amazing at how she can keep them alive year after year in containers. So that's it's really nice. So let's see. I don't see any more questions. Okay. Do you want to have a discussion, Heather? Yeah,
well, that's only part one of my presentation.
Oh, I'm sorry.
So that's okay. I just thought we would take a little pause and a little breather, because I know I was talking really fast and I get really excited. So I just wanted an opportunity, if anyone did have anything, that we did that before I continued. I did want to thank, they're on here as Bodan or Bowden, who corrected me. I did say hemlock and I meant larch. So I did mix up that yellow, what I said was Canadian hemlock. It's not a Canadian hemlock, that's a larch. So I stand corrected.
Oh, I have a question actually. Could I?
Yes.
About does anyone know? Is anyone been able to find lamb's quarters growing in High Park? I've been looking for it recently.
I think that they've been there and have been removed. They're kind of, say, in the boulevard beds. I think they grew in the boulevard beds and they've been carefully picked out.
All right, too bad. I was really excited about them since I found they've got really high amounts of vitamin B12, and it's hard to find that in a plant source. So I've just been looking to add it to my diet, but maybe I can find it somewhere else. Thanks.
I will add that to my list. Lamb's quarters is B12. That's good to know. Didn't even think about that. Okay. So if everybody's had
There's a question in the chat. Do you have a suggestion for native hedge in semi-shade?
That you would have to leave with me. As I did mention, I am by no means a native species expert. It's something that I'm learning a lot more about, especially natives as well as edibles. It is very quickly becoming a passion, but it is not my background or my area of expertise, unfortunately. I'm sure there are lots of people here who might have a suggestion though.
Well, I have a suggestion.
Perfect.
I have a lot of shade in my backyard, and I've been trying to grow some shrubs, and the one that's really succeeding the most is the elderberry, which I believe is a native edible.
Nice, yeah.
And so that's doing really well with limited sunlight.
Oh, was that something else? Snowberry, oh, so pretty. It's a beautiful shrub. Okay. Yep.
If people want to get in touch with you, on the page on our website, I've given a link to your Facebook and Pinterest. Is there email as well where people can reach you?
Sure. Actually, I can put it right here in the chat. And then if anyone has any other questions or comments or wants to, oh, I put it to the wrong thing. let me know something that I said wrong, or by all means, I'm very, very open, and I am also very early on my journey of plants. So even though I am fascinated with plants, I absolutely love them. I've only been studying and working with landscape design and plants and horticulture for 6 years. So I'm still very early on my journey. I look forward to learning lots from all of you guys and the High Park stewards. So, okay, everybody's ready if we keep going? Okay, here we go. Back at her again. So, next thing, I'm just going to show a few pictures. These are pictures that I've either taken or they're images from used with perennials.com. Excellent, excellent source. As well as there's a few Pinterest images on here. So some of them you'll probably recognize. Some of them are actually quite common images that do come up when you search certain things. But these combinations, for me, are things that really excited me for different reasons. So this first one with hosta and Hakonokloa, so Japanese fountain grass or Japanese forest grass. I'll leave that to some of you to correct me. It's one of them. I always mix it up. But just that combination of fine and coarse texture in the garden is one of my favorite things to see and design with. Next one, this was actually in a Canadian garden magazine. So at the end of my presentation, all the sources are listed. But the ageratum with the tomatoes, there's something about this lavender color and the red with the green. I'm just in love with this combination, and I am currently planting it in my backyard. My tomatoes look very sad right now, so I did not include any photos of my own tomatoes. Ajuga and Creeping Jenny. This is a great ground cover. Ajuga can be invasive. So bugle weeds, so that's another one of my caution, discretionary. It does spread really quickly, but it's really good for erosion control. So if you have areas that keep washing out, or water keeps, taking things away for whichever reason, this is really, really good for erosion, but I like using it as a garden border. So I'll use this at the front of the garden, and then no weeds pop up, because between the Ajuga and the Creeping Jenny, it doesn't let any weeds grow. Sanguisorba and Carl Forester grass. Carl Forester, it is a cultivar, so it's not a native, but it is a well-behaved, low-maintenance grass. Generally, I don't consider myself a grass fan. I know that some of them are very beneficial and some of them are very invasive, but this one, there's a reason why I think it's so common. So I did include it here. It's not necessarily weird, but it is wonderful because you plant one and it stays very, very well behaved. And I just loved this combination with the Carl Forester as a foundation planting in the back. Blue Delphinium and Rose Campion. Rose Campion can be invasive. Spreads by seed, spreads very quickly. Delphiniums, I do not consider to be a low maintenance perennial. You do need to stake them or the whole flowers will just fall right over. But I love this combination, just the saturation of how the purple blue delphinium flowers with the hot pink Rose Campion. I love this combination. Something else too that I think is really great for small spaces. So whether that's even just a small front porch or an entry garden or small backyards, is selecting plants with a single color. So doing a monochromatic planting scheme. So in this image, we've got the white birch with the white hydrangeas. And it just looks clean. Even though, it's maybe a little wild and not very manicured, just having that color, that same color repeated in the garden makes things look really, really crisp and clean. Black mondo grass and lamb's ear. Talk about weird and wonderful. Seeing this in a planter. So I would actually put lamb's ears around the outside of a planter and then put the black mondo grass in the center. It's one of those combinations that you don't often see black and white as a planting in a garden. It's just very interesting to see or to come across. I love this one. So butterfly weed and daisies. So the milkweed, as a lot of you know, it has that pink, that soft pink color and almost the fuzzy leaves, where butterfly weed doesn't grow as high and it doesn't get as wild. So milkweed will spread, as you know, when you pluck the things and they go flying in the air, which is a lot of fun for kids, and I love doing it still. Butterfly weed is when you plant one and it pretty much stays as a clump. It's pretty well behaved. And I think it's a nicer, more easier to maintain shape for the garden. Great for smaller spaces, but I love this combination with the daisies. Here's one of those images that pretty much if you Google or look up alliums, Globemaster allium is the one that's shown in this picture. This image comes up quite a bit online. Just having those large globes of the Globemaster allium with that feather reed grass. It's stunning. It almost looks like the balls are kind of floating in amongst the grass. Love it. Next portion of my talk, I'm just going to talk about some conversation starters. So these are things in the garden with reference to design that I personally like to incorporate into gardens. So the first thing I'm going to talk about is Megakuri landscape design or garden design, originated in Japan. Next one is custom sculpture. So I do consider myself an artist, even though it's really difficult for me not to compare myself to others because there's so much incredible work out there that I am inspired by, and I don't yet have a shop or a warehouse where I can build. But when there is a request for custom sculpture, I will find a place to build it. So whimsy, I absolutely love whimsy in the garden. So these are things that make you look and think and ponder and feel something that's cute, something that's silly. This image here actually is, I took this picture in Italy. We were at a garden and this is a water fountain, a public water fountain. So we went up to take a drink and you look in and there's two floating heads looking up at you. And it's just that sense of surprise, that element of surprise, which I love. And then interaction and play. As someone with a theater background, I've been acting for over 20 years and I've owned my own theater company for the last 10 years. I think it's really important that as adults, we play, we interact with others, we interact with our spaces. And if we can design spaces that encourage play and interaction, I think that makes the space all the more interesting. So the first thing we're talking about here is Megakuri design. So this is, when you translate it, it's hide and reveal. So it's intentionally putting something in the garden that you don't see right away. It's a surprise. It's a happy accident that you're walking through the garden and suddenly you see something that you didn't before because something was in the way. So for example, this image I took in Italy, and you're actually on a wild forest path in this botanical garden. And you're surrounded by trees and it's all shade. And as you exit the forest, you're opened up into this beautiful courtyard. And the first thing you see is this incredible hosta. I'm not sure how old it is, but it just continued on almost as a hedge. Like it was just stunning. And it's reflecting in the pond of water. And to me, just seeing the reflection of the hosta, it was that element of surprise. You come around the corner, you come out of the woods, and you're given a gift in the garden. You've made it this far. Here's a little present. This is actually an example too of Megakuri design. So imagine you're walking down this path and in the distance you can see that something is over there. You're not sure what it is, you can't make it out. So you are drawn into the space. You're drawn and pulled into the garden to see what's there. And it isn't until you continue your walk that you discover something new. A new site, a new location, something of interest. So not only do you discover the bench, but you also discover this waterfall that from your first approach to the garden, you didn't even know existed. This is a landscape design I'm currently working on for a client actually. So apologies for how rough it is. It's hard for me to show this software using Zoom and PowerPoint. Usually I would just do it live. So this is the view outside of her back door. So she looks at her back door and the back wall of her house, so that's all right here, is hiding her backyard. And having the step design curl around the house, you know that something is over there, but you can't see what it is. So it isn't until you go for a walk and start walking down this path and you come out and around the house that you see that there's something else going on. So this is that path that continues on to the back corner of her house. And there's actually a door here. We're having it bordered by 2 sculptural elements in the garden, which again pulls you even further into the backyard. You're curious, what's behind that door? What is that? It's that secret garden element. And then she's also requested, this is an interactive wood bench that her kids can climb on with a basketball pad. So this is something that we currently have in process. Custom sculpture. So this is something that I designed. I just love floating elements in the garden. So this is a little bit later, pushing into October-ish. So things are actually getting pretty cold. A lot of the leaves have already fallen. But in the summertime, all this grass in the bottom, all this wild area in the forest is pretty tall. And so the blue balls look like they're floating among the grass. So this was something actually I designed and installed at a golf course here in London. Here's another one that I designed and installed. This was a temporary installation at the Royal Botanical Gardens, and it was Spring Awakening. And this is these little guys here, and this here. So all of these red elements were designed to capture snow. So I installed them in the fall at the end of my co-op, and then they were there in the garden for all of winter and captured the snow. I only used recycled materials. So Royal Botanical Garden, as you can see here, they've got the little metal name tags for all of their plants in all of their gardens. And when they get old, those name tags of the plants get recycled. And so I actually took a whole bunch of old tags, that's what these are, and I bent them and warped them to represent butterflies. And then all of these too, these are all old parts from different machines and some old wire that I just spray painted red. This is something else. So this, when you zoom out, I don't have a large enough picture, but it was inspired by the Van Gogh Starry Nights painting. So this is a walkway through a friend of mine's house. And these darker river rock or potato stone, depending on what you want to call it, they're actually giant swirls. And then in between all the joints and the cracks is polymeric sand. So you don't get the weeds that pop up. This was installed in 2014 and it still doesn't have any weeds. Yes. Here's another one of my favorite floating blue balls. So this is for a residential application. This is right beside somebody's entranceway to their front door. And they actually messaged me for a long time after we installed it saying, you know, I get so many people saying, I thought that was a flower. I thought that was so weird. What was that? You know, they're floating in the garden. So it brought a lot of joy to a lot of people. Whimsy. I hope my zombie lawn gnome doesn't scare anybody, but I had to include him. He is actually in my garden. I love strange and peculiar things that you're not expecting in the garden. So I do have zombie lawn gnomes, but they're hidden. They're hidden amongst the hostas. So as you're walking through the garden, you look and you're like, wow, that's a pretty hosta. And then you look again and you're like, wait a second, is that a zombie lawn gnome? And that's whimsy. That's that double take of something unexpected or unique. This picture here, actually, I'm not sure if it shows very clearly or not, but this is a mirror. So this is a very small landscape. This is actually probably only 15 by 15 feet about. Might even be a little smaller than that. And a way to extend the garden, make it look bigger than it is a huge mirror. That's something I love to put in some of my designs. Do need to bring them in on winter so they don't crack and break. Using things unexpected or using things for a different reason. So this is a boat that's been put upright to showcase plants. And this is a picture of myself and a classmate looking at a reflection in a gazing ball in Italy. So again, you come across something and it takes you off guard and you just can't help but be impacted by it. this image here, I love it, but it's actually, it's interactive. So we're walking through this garden in Italy, and we come across this little seated patio area. We've got the bench. It's inviting you to, you know, come, take a rest, you know, sit down, take a load off. But there's nothing really necessarily crazy or bright, beautiful flowers or anything like that. But it isn't until you approach the bench. So you're walking on the patio stones and you sit down. And that's when you realize that in and amongst all of these, the flagstone is actually thyme and mint have been planted. So they keep mowing it so that it's really, really short. But as you walk on it, it releases that aroma, that fragrance in the air. It's a combination of mint and thyme. And that's interacting. It plays on your senses. And suddenly you are transported to somewhere. You know, the sense of smell can bring back memories and make you think about mom's kitchen or cooking or somebody's house. And I just loved that feeling of having my senses awoken in a garden unexpectedly. Here's another one in Italy. So very, very formal garden. However, these boxed shrubs that were very carefully pruned had these little entranceways cut into them. And so we and my classmates, we created our own garden sculptures. And that's just interacting with your space. You see something and you just can't help but get in there and be a part of it. Water is a great way to add interactions, whether it's a small fountain or a still pond. Having said that, water is not low maintenance. That is a whole other talk for another time. I have very strong opinions on water bodies in residential uses. It's definitely important, but it is not low maintenance. And then that's just me having a rest on another sculpture in Italy. This is Whistling Gardens. So they have this spot near their Casa Blanca, as they call it, the White House in the gardens, where you just feel like there would be a sculpture standing on these pedestals. So every year that I go, I take a new picture on these pedestals. So this photo I actually took there yesterday. So that's me and that's my friend Angela being our own garden sculptures. And I do know that maybe I'm a little weird, but I'm definitely affected by my spaces and I love to interact with them. Really, really few quick things about low maintenance. Can't get into everything. But here, I really did want to reiterate that a lot of people believe rock gardens are low maintenance. And I strongly disagree. So something like this, having worked in maintenance for 4 years, all I see is a lot of line trimming that has to be done. And I'm not interested. Like, that's just crazy. It's pretty, it's beautiful. I don't want to be the one to have to maintain that. Or something like this where you have the rocks as the garden border. Could you imagine mowing that with a lawnmower or a line trimmer? Like, you're gonna be throwing grass everywhere. You're gonna be kicking up rocks and no, thank you. And then something like this where depending on how this was installed, you're going to get weeds coming up through these rocks. So unless they're spraying, which I don't like to use, so I will never design a space that requires spray or herbicide in order to maintain. I think that's completely ridiculous. This can become a very high maintenance garden very quickly. Spreaders versus clumpers. Won't talk too much about it. I'm not actually looking at the time here. Sharon, how am I doing? Are you going to kick me off soon?
Nope, it's your Zoom. So it's up to you.
Perfect. I was just like, oh man, I'm getting all excited.
We're happy to keep going.
Okay.
12:30 is when the normal time is, but people can stay on as long as you want.
Okay, it's 11:40 now. Gotcha. So in terms of maintenance, actually intentionally selecting clumpers instead of spreaders is going to save you so much time. It's a lot less weeding. You don't have to cut them back. You don't have to, weed out the stranglers. So here on the left are spreaders, and yes, that is Chameleon Plant. It is invasive. It's still one of my favorites. I'm sorry, I can't help it. This, however, is not one of my favorites. This is goutweed. If you have this in your garden, I am sorry for your loss. And I can't believe you can still buy this at some greenhouses. Do not buy it. I can't think of anything good that can come from having that plant in your garden. But I don't have strong opinions about it or anything. This is another one too, Phragmites, or freaking Phragmites, as I like to refer to it as, which you see in ditches and along highways. Extremely invasive. You know, a lot of cities have planted it because it's great for erosion control and they're drought resistant, but they're just a disaster for the landscape. So all of these spreaders here, they're going to spread, get out of control, while all of these here are clumpers. You plant one, you have one. So spreaders, they'll actually spread either by runners or roots underground or by seed. You plant one and it just has babies all over the place. Where clumpers, like a hosta, you plant one and you'll always have one. It'll just get bigger and bigger. Having said that, there are some hostas that will spread, like expand very quickly and kind of shoot out roots like this and have hosta babies pop up. So you do still have to be careful with hostas. Naturalized plantings, of course, are very low maintenance. Something like this for a lawn area that's actually going to be used or walked through, you'd have to be careful. Ticks are always something that you need to be aware of. But if this is a garden that's only meant to be looked at by people and to be experienced and benefit pollinators, insects, animals, then you know, that's something that you can have at the back. But this is something you could mow once a year or just leave alone, and it will still give you that interest and still be cool to look at. One way to control clumpers or spreaders in the garden, this is something that I've done in a couple of my designs. So anything that would spread by roots. This system here isn't going to help anything that spreads by seed, because the seeds are going to fall outside the pot anyway. But something that spreads by roots, like a lot of grasses, you can plant one in the pot, cut out the bottom, and it will stay in that area. It will get root bound over time, so there is still maintenance associated with that, but that's one way of controlling spreaders in the garden if you really want to put one in your garden. Another thing too, I'm not necessarily a fan of rubber or plastic edging, and I am not a fan of rubber mulch, which is not in this presentation, so please don't do that to your plants or your landscape. But something else you can do is actually installing this rubber or plastic edging actually in the garden underneath the mulch. So that way you can actually design waves or designs in your garden that the plants won't cross those borders. And then of course planters. So this is the one that I say, if you're going to put chameleon plant in your garden, it goes in a pot that is raised above the soil line so it can't jump out and spread all over the place. And a mow strip. So you have your garden edge like this, whether it's brick or whatever edging you want, just by laying down a flat, smooth surface mow strip, you actually can take out line trimming altogether. You can just put the wheel of the lawnmower right on this lawn strip and mow. So great for low maintenance, less work. So getting into the last few slides of the presentation, I wanted to share with you guys some of my personal recommendations. So this page here is some of my prized books in my library. It wouldn't be very easy. I could, if I knew how to turn this around so you guys could see, but I have a floor to ceiling library of plant books. Annuals and perennials, the Western Garden. I've got a plant finder encyclopedia. But these ones here, these are a really good foundation. If you're looking to invest in plant books or design books, these ones here are my personal favorites. The Inward Garden, to me, this was a game changer. Just to design gardens and actually create mini worlds that have an effect on your psyche. It's a very powerful, well-written book. So, of course, the Manual of Woody Landscape Plants. Don't leave home without it. So, that's those. Grow Me Instead. I'm not sure if, Sharon, if you've got a link to this on your website, but a really good resource. If you're looking to plant something and you want to know if it's invasive, you can look up Grow Me Instead. You can look up the plant that you want. So for example, English ivy, and right there it says unwanted, that this can be invasive, that this will take over, that it blocks out native species. But then what it does is it provides you with options that are similar to what you're looking for, but are safe and are good for the environment, that are beneficial and or native. Really, really great resource. Couple of personal recommendations. I do have 2 links here that I don't know if we want to watch or not. Sharon, do you want to take a vote? Do you guys want to see? I don't know if many people have seen Whistling Gardens. I've got a YouTube.
Yes, show us.
Yeah, show us, show us. Okay, so let's see if I can pull this up here.
We can't see the screen.
You can't see the screen. Or everybody's just watching me watch the screen. Let's go like this. Sorry, everybody. I got really excited and into it. Let's try that again. There we go. Okay, take 2. So this is a video of Whistling Gardens. So this is the place where I had my first co-op. It's near Simcoe. Highly recommend you visit if you can. Let's do full screen. So that is Whistling Gardens. They have the largest peony collection in all of North America. So they have over, oh, something else is starting. They have over 1,200 varieties of peonies. So they have the largest North American public showing of peonies. And next weekend, they should all be like 80% in bloom. When I was there yesterday, it was about 30, maybe 30–40% in bloom. But I think one more week, it's going to be a real show. So back to the original presentation here. There's also a video here. I can post the link or give it to Sharon to post later. The rock garden at RBG. It's a little bit of a longer video. but showing a little bit more about the history of the place, how it was built in a gravel pit. And what they've done with it is extraordinary. If you have a chance to go RBG in Burlington to see that, it's just outstanding. Two things that I've seen for film that have really stayed with me. You can look them up. I'm pretty sure both are available on YouTube to watch. Around the World in 80 Gardens by the incredible Monty Don. Really, really great series, as well as Gardens of the World with Audrey Hepburn. She's always classic, and to hear her talk about gardens and show us as she walks through these gardens is it's very, very interesting watch. Next thing I have here, so some sculpture and artists that really inspire me. Dale Chihuly of Chihuly Glass. So he does art installations and sculpture using blown glass. So all of these are glass, all blown by hand. He has a whole studio and he has full staff that actually make his designs. Incredible work. Very impactful for me personally. Alexander Calder, one of my favorites. He's mostly known for his mobiles as well as his large red metal sculptures. But what I really like and am inspired by with the red sculptures is they do encourage interaction in public spaces. So this one, for example, in Chicago, you see a lot of photos online of people, you know, hugging the legs of the sculpture and taking photos, or trying to push it over and taking a photo. So it's that sheer scale of the piece, but also how it encourages people to interact with it. Paul Galatny, so on Facebook as well as Instagram, he is known as the Tattooed Gardener. His posts are so inspiring, so interesting. He is the head gardener at the Toronto Botanical Gardens, and he shares his journey of he'll walk through the gardens at Toronto Botanical, and he will share his photos of what's in bloom, what he sees. Highly recommend you give him a follow. Really, really inspiring plant guy. So he's one of my favorites. Special thanks to Sharon from High Park Stewards for inviting me to do this and, you know, let my plant nerd out a little bit with all of you lovely people, as well as Jacqueline Scobie from the High Park Urban Forestry for making the introduction and making this all happen. I've got my sources here if anyone needs to do anything, and that is the end of my presentation. So thank you all for joining me on this lovely plant journey.
So Heather, thank you so much. That was really wonderful and something we really need these days. Just something inspiring that feels good and beautiful. I see that you've recorded this. Will you be posting it somewhere?
Yes, so I will send you the link.
Okay, and then I'll post the link in our online resources page.
Perfect.
Let's see. So shall we open it up to questions? People
yeah, for sure.
And turn on their video if they want.
Yeah, lay it on me. It's so new doing the Zoom thing, because when it's an audience of people, I can usually, you know, pick out the people that I want to pick on, or, you know, I can see somebody getting excited about a certain plant, or here, I actually can't see anybody's faces. I'm just talking to my own PowerPoint presentation, which is a very different experience.
So if you move the mouse to the bottom of the screen, you could say turn on video if you like.
Yep. Oh, I can see everybody's video, but while I'm presenting, all I can see is my presentation. So now I can see everybody. Very cool.
Well, you've inspired me to go out and weed the patch in my front yard, because I'm getting a few new plants from Project Pollinator. So I will weed a patch and put them in. So
nice.
I've been procrastinating, so you've inspired me to actually go in and do it.
I think I'm going to do some gardening today.
I did want to mention for Project Pollinator, if people are in the area, the plants that have been given or actually sold for the spring are done, but there will be another cohort in the fall, so you could sign up to get some plants in the fall as well as looking at the resources that are there too. And let's see.
Oh, I see.
I'd like to continue doing these on-air online meetings. So if there are some good suggestions, let me know. And I believe you said, was it Paul? Heather, you said
yes.
Paul Galatney?
Paul Galatney. So the Tattooed Gardener on Facebook.
Okay.
Fantastic. Oh, I hope he does one of these talks. I'll be watching that for sure. I do see somebody posted about experience with aronia. So that's chokeberry. Great for attracting birds. But besides that, I can't say I've planted a lot or designed with them. Usually I go for the serviceberry. So we get a lot of, or previously I had a lot of clients who lived in condos. So a lot smaller scale, and the serviceberry I found was a great single specimen that would attract the songbirds, but also provide that seasonal interest. So usually serviceberry was my go-to, but aronia is beautiful, and I do like the blackberries on them. So, any other questions? Oh, favorite plant. I don't know if I say Sharon might, tisk me. I really like ginkgo, and I know it's not native. And I know it doesn't really do much for pollinators except the female trees, which you can't actually buy. I'm not sure if anyone here has smelled the fruit of a female ginkgo tree, but it smells like rotting flesh. So I don't recommend buying ginkgo for your pollinators because the smell is so atrocious that it's not worth it. There are better options. But ginkgo is, I would say, one of my favorites. Been around since the dinosaurs, doesn't really get any diseases. And there's lots of varieties. So it's probably my favorite.
Can you tell me a little bit more about the Seven Suns?
Yes.
The zone specifically.
So I'd have to actually look that up. I know it's southwestern Ontario. I want to say it's 5A, 5B, but it might actually be zone 6. Just so cool in the landscape. And like I said, I've never actually seen a plant that actually vibrated with pollinators before. Just incredible.
I have a question. Sort of. You showed a slide with ajuga and creeping jenny, and the creeping jenny looked yellow in your slide. Yeah. And I don't know if it's the same plant because I thought it was creeping jenny that's running through my lawn, and it's horrible to get rid of. Mine is green. I don't know what that and it's very invasive.
Yes.
So I don't know. So is that the same? I'm wondering why it was yellow.
Possibly. So creeping jenny, it ranges from almost a limey chartreuse green to yellow. So throughout the season, it will actually change a little bit. Using it in plant borders that aren't contained, it will get into your lawns. So if once that starts spreading, as it is a spreading ground cover, so it would.
Oh, it is. Okay.
Yeah, so ideally you'd want it in a raised garden bed or something that has a really substantial garden edge on it. A deep spade edge isn't going to be enough to keep the creeping jenny from staying in your garden. It definitely will get into the lawn.
Well, it's in my lawn and I'm trying to keep it out of my garden, actually. And that's why I've actually had to almost redo my lawn because it was so invasive. But I took a course on foraging, and creeping jenny was really good to eat, and it was full of vitamins, and I never knew that was.
So the only thing I would say with that, creeping jenny, for the most part, I've only ever seen it in greenhouses and plant centers where it's a cultivar, and I personally am not comfortable eating something that's a cultivar. So that's a man-made created plant. And I've never just seen straight creeping Jenny. The Latin name for it actually is escaping me right now, but yes, it is listed on Grow Me Instead, as is Chameleon Plant. It's still one of my favorites.
Okay. Yeah, I wouldn't use it. It looks so pretty. Mine, I've never seen it yellow. Mine is just green, and it's awful to get out. Thank you.
Probably just a different cultivar.
Okay, that was a great presentation. Thank you so much.
Very nerve-wracking.
Yeah, because you're
using Zoom.
Yeah, but it's great. We can take notes, and it was really interesting. I loved your combinations. Some of the one that was really struck me was Sonia Bluestar. Yeah. Where would I get that? Where are some of the places? Because the things that you've shown, other than the hydrangeas, and I've never really seen. Is there I'm in Toronto. Is there a greenhouse where you think that I could get some of these plants?
Interesting, because actually, so even though this presentation is weird and wonderful, these are all commonly found in greenhouses. But I would say they're usually stocked in smaller quantities because they're not your common hydrangea. They're not your common spirea or boxwood. They all do really well here. They all seem to thrive in southwestern Ontario. If you ask, I would maybe just go to one of your garden centers, anywhere that sells shrubs. So shrubs or larger perennials, it's pretty common. There are two varieties. So the one that I've shown is the fern leaf one, or thread leaf, very, very fine texture. There is another one that has more of the lobed leaf structure. That would be more of a coarse texture in the garden, but both I've seen at many garden centers. I'm not familiar with Toronto garden centers. Here in London, we've got 4 or 5 in the surrounding areas that I go to. But probably, unless you're taking a road trip, won't be something, unless you go to Whistling Gardens, which you should all do.
Yeah,
have it there.
It's outside London, did you say? Is that where it is? I'm not sure.
Whistling Gardens is in between Brantford and Simcoe.
Brantford and Simcoe. So that's not that far from Toronto.
I don't think so. It's in Norfolk County.
Norfolk. Okay, great. Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just want to say, if people are looking for native plants, the In the Zone Gardens has lists of native plant nurseries, and the North American Native Plant Society has lists, and our website under Garden Resources has links to different groups and places as well that will have lists. But
I'm not
I
sure
don't know
about,
how updated they've been.
With Toronto, we have 3 garden centers here in London where they have a whole area dedicated to native species. So even walked in, even if you're a member of the general public and you don't necessarily know a lot about plants, but you want to select your native plants, there's a big sign, native plants, and it's a whole aisle. There's 3 different garden centers, which I would hope that more places would do. So
yeah, Fiesta Gardens at Christie and north of Bloor does have native plants as well. I know that.
Cool. Well, I don't have anything else. That was it. I guess I kind of flew through that. I get so excited when I start talking really fast.
Thank you. Come on, Sharon. Close it.
Cool. Well, thank you, Sharon. I think that's it.
Oh, thank you so much for having this presentation. And thank you, Jacqueline. I don't think you're here right now, but I really thank Jacqueline for letting us know about you. And I do encourage everyone to go and check out her Stewards at Home section as well. So thanks again, and have a lovely summer.
Great. Awesome. Well, thanks, everybody.
Okay. Bye.